What's up, everyone? Matt Gajewski here, back again talking college basketball. It is March the 3rd, Monday night action. Conference tournaments are slowly beginning. We had the ASUN tip-off last night, some of the lower seeds. Now we get to see those that advance play Lipscomb and North Alabama with some wider spreads. But there's also good games up top. Duke is on the slate, and a few of the mid-majors are finishing their conferences tonight. But before we get started, I want to thank you guys. We experienced a fair amount of growth over the weekend. Anyone that liked, subscribed, even just watch time is big for these videos, especially for a new channel that's not monetized, does not have a lot of subscribers. It helps a lot. So if you've done that, thank you. If you do like the content and you decide you want to, I'll thank you in advance because it helps a ton if you do that. All right, let's get into the slate. We're going to start up top with a game that has maybe lost a little bit of its shine. Kansas takes on Houston. This is a game with a 9-point spread, 9.5 in some spots in favor of the home Houston team. The total is 132.5. And this might surprise you that it's so lopsided in favor of Houston. It certainly surprised me, but what has Kansas done with their body of work recently for us to think this should be any lower? This is a rematch. They played on January 25th. Kansas lost in double overtime on their home floor, and they really gave this one away. There were points in the game where they were 99% chance to win. Somehow they outshot and out-rebounded Houston, not by much, but still. You beat Houston on the glass, even if it's by one rebound. It's just a crazy feat. Houston's so good at rebounding. Rarely do you see a team ever eclipse them. They failed to hit their free throws down the stretch. They let Houston back in, and they gave a game away. So they're now 3-4 in the top 25. Most of their wins are front-loaded to the beginning of that season. Duke, Michigan State, Iowa State. 2 of those were in November. The non-con games, of course. And then we had Iowa State without Milan Momcilovic. They still have 3 losses outside the top 50, West Virginia, Kansas State, and Utah. And the problem is all of those are occurring of late, or at least most of them. So what do we make of this Kansas team right now, where they're headed, their just entire body of work? I have a lot of questions with this, and I'm not sure where I land on it. I personally think they are a little more talented than what they've put on the floor recently, evidenced by their game against Houston. But it's just hard to see them succeeding right now. Houston is 4-3 against the top 25. They beat Kansas, of course, beat Arizona, Iowa State, and Texas Tech. Honestly, I think you could poke a hole in almost every of those wins if you wanted to. Efficiency metrics, I mean, like Bart Torvik has this team number 1 in the country. But let's talk about some of these games. Texas Tech and Iowa State were severely shorthanded in their games. Even Sampson, in his post-game press conferences, gave his own team an asterisk. And it kind of, like, I don't know what to do with it. I'm not sure it's actionable. But it's definitely less impressive than beating either of those teams at full strength. The Arizona game even was ugly. That came down to the final seconds of the game, and we'll talk about some of the stylistics in that game a little later. With all that said, I mean, this team only has 4 losses. They all came by 5 points or fewer. So even if you, I don't know, flip some of the wins, losses, it's just super close. Their only real questionable win-loss is San Diego State at 41 out in Vegas, but even that was close. And that was a weird MTE and non-con. Houston has an awesome resume, to keep this short. Resume-wise, or resumes aside, Kansas is 14th in effective height, 57th in rebounding. Houston's 253rd in effective height, but 28th in rebounding. Again, this team just shows so much effort on the glass. They're so well coached. They're going to have rebounding advantages against most teams. A lot of that stems from their effort offensively, where they're 12th in offensive rebounding. Again, this wasn't a huge factor in the first game. Kansas did out-rebound Houston 45-43. But let's get into some of the recent play in the shooting. Kansas is 78th in effective field goal percentage. Houston is 75th, but there are strengths and weaknesses within each team. Houston is 3rd in the country at three-point percentage. Yes, that is correct. A Houston Cougars team is number 3. However, they are 230th in 2 or 3-point rate. I don't understand, they're 300th in 3-point rate, 230th in 2-point rate. I flat out just don't understand what is going on with this Houston team and why they aren't taking more threes. And the optics bear this out. You turn on a Houston game, and they are kicking it into Juwan Roberts and Joseph Tugler in the paint far too often. In the Arizona game, I keep looking up from my computer and seeing kick into Juwan Roberts, and he takes an ugly hook shot from the elbow that leads to a long defensive rebound for Arizona that they kick out in transition and nearly score and win the game. You have LJ Cryer, Emmanuel Sharp, and Milos Uzan all shooting over 41% from three. Why is Juwan Roberts taking so many shots? Anyway, that's why their effective field goal percentage isn't higher, because they're not taking enough threes. Kansas is 74th at interior, scoring 166 from three. You can basically poke a hole in every one of their players on offense. Dickinson, for as efficient as he is around the rim, he's absolutely doing nothing for you on the perimeter, so you have no floor spacing. And when you have Juwan Roberts, Tugler, and Francis on the inside, if they need him, it's a tough matchup. Their other bigs, Badunga and Adams, are almost zeros offensively. Great on defense, but not great when you're trying to score. DeJuan Harris is a pure facilitator. He's below 30% from three. Then you have Zeke Mayo at 39% from three, Rylan Griffin at 37%. If these guys had a cold patch, which Zeke Mayo certainly has of late, you're cooked. All these offensive limitations now are going to be facing Houston's number one defense, who doesn't have a weakness. I mean, this is just a brutal matchup for Kansas, but I'm sort of interested in an under here. Mathematically, do make this towards the under, but there's a couple reasons for and against this. Pacing, definitely towards the under. Houston's the third slowest team in the country. Kansas is a little above average, but they should be slowed down here. Both offenses have some sort of limitation. Kansas, it's a talent thing. Houston, it's a stylistics thing in their preference to have Juwan shoot bad shots. I don't know. But I think there's also some situational details that might point towards an over. First of all, this did go to 136 in regulation in the first matchup. That was also a foul fest, and both teams were just barely above 50% from the line. If this gets back into the 30s and that was a double OT game, so there's going to be more fouls, but anyway, a lot of fouls. If there's fouls again, and these teams shoot a little better from the line, an under could be absolutely cooked. And if we know one thing, it's Juwan Roberts and Tugler love to foul. No, only Samson Johnson and Graham Ike like fouling more. But anyway, 132 is pretty clearly the number right now. It hasn't moved. I think there's a chance it goes up, which is why I've hesitated. I would play the 132 if I had to, but I think we're going to get a 133. I'm seeing a little of these 132 start to get juiced towards the over. So we will wait and we will see if we can't find a better number later in the day. It's also a short Monday slate. So it's hard to talk about some of these games, but we will have some actionable plays later. Next up, Nicholls takes on Lamar. 2-point spread in favor of Lamar. The total is 140.5. These teams are tied for second in the Southland. They're both 13-6. And this game is really important because of the bye structure in this conference. Basically, whoever wins has to play one fewer game in the conference tournament. You're seeing a lot of these conference tournaments go to these progressive bye structures. And the Southland is definitely one of them. We'll talk about a game later with even weirder implications. But only injury in the game, Byron Ireland for Nicholls. I think he might return, but I'm not sure. It's a rematch. They played on January 20th. Nicholls lost to Lamar 78-74. They lost on their home floor. Basically, this came down to Lamar shooting the ball more effectively. They hit 53% of their threes. Most of the peripherals did come in close, aside from turnovers that did favor Nicholls, a matchup that should be in their favor again in this game. And this outcome surprised me a little bit. But anytime a team like this shoots 53% from three, it's going to be hard to overcome that. Anyway, Nicholls is 4-9 against the top 200. Best wins are against Southeastern Louisiana at 197, Seattle at 146. They did beat McNeese at 61, handed McNeese one of their few losses, and then Corpus Christi at 170. They've only lost 2 games outside the top 200. Both of them came to Northwestern State at 240. And I've been impressed with some of their non-con body of work. They played close to New Mexico, 7-point loss, South Alabama, 6-point loss, Towson, a 6-point loss. Lamar's resume is a little different. They're 3-8 against the top 200. Their best win is against this very Nicholls team. And they have 4 losses outside the top 200 and some pretty low. Alabama State at 292, Stephen F. Austin at 270, New Orleans at 343, and Incarnate Word at 242. This is just an overall inferior body of work, but they have the head-to-head. When you look at the stylistics, Lamar holds all the size advantages, 170th in height, 129th in rebounding. On the other side, you have Nicholls at 291st in effective height, 224th in rebounding. But this was not a big factor in the first game. I think that's largely just small sample. Lamar should be better on the glass. They should be better on the offensive glass. I was a little surprised this didn't come out further in their favor. They won the game. And maybe it was just they made more shots than normal, so they didn't have as many opportunities to rebound. Anyway, Nicholls is a little better shooting, 277th in effective field goal, 86 from three. Lamar's 306th in effective field goal, 38th from three, but neither teams are good inside. That's how you get these decent three-point shooting numbers, but horrible overall numbers. Lamar is 354th at interior scoring. Egregiously low for having size advantages. Anyway, they're top 100 in height and they can't score inside. I don't know. I think it's kind of a bad matchup stylistically for both teams. The defenses are the strength of both of these teams. And then three-point defense is actually a little better for both sides. You just have strong guard play and bad interior play. On the periphery, turnover margin doesn't project to be a huge factor. Nicholls won this in the first game. It is slightly in their favor, and that's largely just because they're a team that handles the ball well. They don't turn it over. It's a weird balance of these teams, though. Aside from the height stuff, the scoring stuff, Nicholls has a more balanced lineup, which I think helps their spacing in matchups like this. Any of their players are live to score. Robert Brown and Michael Gray, who comes off the bench, are hitting at least 42% from three. Lamar's a little more imbalanced. They're basically using Andrew Holyfield, and he's a nightmare. He's 6'10", and he shoots 39% from three. But you have more spacing on the Nicholls side. You don't have to stop just one guy on offense in Holyfield. That's the side I lean to, but we make this pretty efficient. This is one we'll watch throughout the day. Going to the American. Wichita State takes on North Texas. An 8-point spread in favor of the Mean Green, a 127 total. A couple injuries in these games. Justin Hill I have listed for Wichita. Technically, he did return in their last game, but he played 7 minutes. So I think just overall health is a question with Justin Hill. North Texas has been without Jonathan Massey for a while. He's not a huge part of their rotation, but he does matter. He does get minutes. North Texas, they can still get the 1 seed. Memphis would have to lose some games they're not projected to lose. So it's definitely not an outcome that's likely. But this is still a game they need to win because UAB is pushing for that 2 seed as well. So a game with a lot of implications for the North Texas team especially. These teams played on January 29th. North Texas won on the road 58-54. Both teams were horrible shooting. Under 25% from three. Under 45% from two. Peripheral stats were almost even, but North Texas did take home more rebounds. They had 13 offensive rebounds to Wichita's 8. One nuance here, technically Wichita State was at full strength, but they had injuries to Bijan Cortez and Ronnie DeGray earlier in the season. This is one of their first games back. Neither had entered the starting lineup. Both are starting now. So that's just a nuance worth mentioning. Wichita State is 4-3 against the top 100. They have wins over Northern Iowa, Minnesota, Kansas State, and Memphis, their best one at 48. But they also have 3 losses outside the top 200. They lost to Kansas City, UTSA, and Tulsa. North Texas 3-4 against the top 25. Beat Minnesota, Oregon State, and Northern Iowa, so they lack that top end win. They only have 2 losses outside the top 100, though, UTSA and UAB. I mean, that's a very good body of work. North Texas is essentially beating everyone they should, only losing to a handful of teams right around their ranking, maybe a little worse. But they did drop the game to Memphis earlier this year. So if this comes to a tie break, Memphis drops the game, North Texas wins, they end up tied. Memphis does have that. Stylistically, North Texas is 114th in effective height, 33rd in rebounding. Wichita State plays a far smaller lineup, 216th in effective height, but they're actually not too far off at rebounding at 60th. Shooting-wise, North Texas 123, 68th from three. Most of that does come from one player. Atten Wright hits 39.5% of his threes, so they are a little reliant on him. But North Texas outranks Wichita State severely on defense, 32-133. And it gets worse when you start breaking this down. Wichita is 194th from three, 133rd on the inside. I will say their best defender, Ronnie DeGray, he missed 12 games, so that's worth noting. But turnover margin favors North Texas as well, not drastically. It's also a game where Wichita State's going to be paced down. They're 109th in tempo. North Texas is third slowest team in the country. I think they're tied with Houston, actually, or close at least. Anyway, North Texas forces you to play a weird style of game that a lot of these teams that play up-tempo aren't comfortable with. At the end of the day, though, an 8-point spread, we show value on this. We make this basically minus 9.3. There's a couple hesitations I have. First, I hate laying near double-digit points with the slowest team in the country. And second, Wichita State is a tough team to actually project because of the injuries they've played with this year. There's a chance you underrate them because of DeGray and Cortez. We'll wait on this and see where it comes in. Wake Forest takes on Duke in the ACC. This was maybe Duke's most competitive game in conference, other than the Clemson loss, of course, that we've seen lately. It's a 21-point spread in favor of the home Duke Blue Devils, totals 145. Wake Forest is healthy. Hildreth missed a game recently, but he's back. Duke, Tyrese Proctor dealing with a bone bruise, and Malik Brown should be out again here. I think they're holding him out till the tournament. It's a rematch again, very competitive game. January 25th, they played. Duke won 63-56. They did trail by 6 points in the second half, which normally isn't something I would mention, but Duke is so seldom trailed that I think we should at least bring it up. Duke crushed Wake Forest on the glass. They dominated defensively, and part of that was just they switched to a zone in the second half and forced Wake Forest to take threes, and they can't take threes. They're horrible at them. It ended up basically giving Duke the game. But let's talk about resumes. Wake Forest is 1-6 against the top 25. They have a lone win over Michigan, who is 25th. They have 3 losses outside the top 90, Florida State, NC State, and Virginia. All of those did occur in February, too, so very recently, team trending in the wrong direction. Duke is the opposite. They're 4-3 against the top 25. They did beat Auburn and Arizona. Then they dropped games to both Kentucky and Kansas as well as Clemson. But a couple things there. You've got 2 non-con games. The best time to catch Duke was earlier in the season before Flagg, Knipple, and these freshmen had time to gel. The transfers as well, like Sion James and Gillis. Anyway, their other loss to Clemson came on the road with Cooper Flagg sick. Duke holds every single advantage. This is the 10th tallest team in the country, 5th in rebounding. Wake Forest is 250th in rebounding, so huge advantage on the glass. Duke is awesome at shooting, top 10 in both effective field goal and three-point percentage. Wake Forest cannot shoot, 206th in effective field goal, 357th from three. And most of this is just what has happened to Hunter Salas, man. Last year, he hit 40% of his threes. This year, he's at 27.9%. If Wake Forest is going to stay in this game, they need him to have some positive regression, which he hasn't shown. And I'm not confident he will in this game. Wake Forest is reliant on interior scoring, where they're 62nd. And they were actually doing well in the first game. But again, Duke switched to that zone, forced Wake Forest to shoot three-pointers over the top, and they collapsed. No shooters on this team couldn't hit them. I'm interested in the under in this game. It is coming up, which is a reason I haven't played it. But we have pace in our favor. Duke's not going to play fast. They're at 260th. They also have the injuries. There's no real incentive for them to play fast. And they're a 20-point favorite. They can still win this game without reaching their expectation of, as 21-point favorites. Wake Forest is also not fast. They're 193rd in pace. And I'm a little worried about them scoring the ball in this game, especially if Duke trots out that zone again. I'm 95% going to play an under on this. I think 145 is the number I'd look for. But that will be in Discord later in the morning, perhaps maybe closer to tip-off. And on that quickly, if you're interested in the Discord, basically what we do there is project all the games, spreads, totals. We project the major games for props. So we're not talking, like Southern and stuff, but we will project Wake Forest Duke. We will project Kansas Houston. We will project North Texas. So those are the games that you can expect, just high majors in general and games that are offered in the prop market. And then access to the model allows us to take some of these games early before lines move. The other thing we do is when injuries break before tip-off, obviously we don't have all the information at the filming of this video, we'll make plays based on those. The link is in the description. There's no long-term commitments. $10 a week, $30 for a month. You could even just do March. And there you have it. Let's move on to our next game. The aforementioned Southern takes on Florida A&M. This is an important game in this conference. Basically, Southern would lock up a regular season title in the SWAC if they could beat Florida A&M. But then Florida A&M is part of this three-way tie at fourth. And I think they need to win this game because it's a logjam. And only the top 6 teams get buys. They're on the outer edge. A loss could push them out of a bye. So anyway, it's an important game. Southern's a 3-point favorite. Florida A&M, the home team, the total's at 141. It's a rematch from January 11th. Southern won 91-57. They were at home. They outshot Florida A&M, crushed them on the glass, forced 15 turnovers. And that's what you're going to get with Southern when they're actually hitting. But they are a volatile team. The SWAC is typically a conference getting 15s and 16 seeds. So when we talk about resumes for these teams, they need to be viewed with a different lens. Southern is 1-6 against the top 200. Their lone win did come against Louisiana Tech at 112. And they only have one loss outside the top 300 to East Texas A&M. Rest in peace, Texas A&M Commerce. That was in their third game, and they only lost by 2 points. Florida A&M is 0-7 against the top 200. But this non-con schedule is unbelievable. Their 7 losses all came against top 82 teams. So, I'm trying to frame this up. Okay, did Florida A&M beat anyone in the top 200? No. Did they play anyone reasonable in the top 200? No. Everyone was in the top 82. Their next highest opponent is Presbyterian. So you go from the 82nd ranked team to the 228th. Anyway, they did beat Presbyterian by 3 points. Florida A&M has 2 losses outside the top 300 to Grambling State and Alabama A&M. So they're comparable bodies of work for the most part. Tough to evaluate what the hell Florida A&M was doing in non-con. Anyway, Southern is 97th in rebounding despite being 329th in effective height. Florida A&M is the exact opposite. They're 76th in effective height and 259th in rebounding. Someone explain that to me. Florida A&M is a slightly better shooting team. They're 215th in effective field goal, 147th in three-point percentage. But Southern outranks them on defense, 103-324, so substantially. I will say Southern is a little weaker at 3. They're 172nd there. So Florida A&M, a decent three-point shooting team against just a decent Southern three-point defense. Could that be an edge? I think probably not. On offense, Southern is 312th in effective field goal percentage. They're outside the top 280 inside and out. This team has real problems scoring. But the other thing is Florida A&M has real problems on defense. And as we saw in the first game, the defense was so bad that even a poor shooting team in Southern could really score at will and put up 90 points. Southern is just a flat-out more talented team. When you just look at the roster, the higher-end talent, Nunley and Dubois are the second and third most efficient players in the SWAC. Southern has 10 of the top 40 players in the conference in total efficiency. Florida A&M is not balanced like that. They're top-heavy. They have Jordan Chapman and Roger Coffey at 8th and 9th. But no one else on their team occupies the top 40. I think -3 is a fine play. 3.5 is out there in a lot of spots. I'm nervous backing any of these really low-level SWAC teams, and Southern's probably going to win this conference and represent them in the NCAA tournament. But man, we're talking about a team outside the top 300 in most shooting metrics. As you know, I've been scarred with Texas A&M and some of these teams that can't shoot. Southern is very much in that ballpark. But this is one that is probably going to get taken on the Southern side as they try to lock up basically the conference and ensure that they're the number 1 seed heading into the SWAC conference tournament. We have a lot of games that we're hesitating on, but the next one is not one of them. Grambling State takes on Bethune-Cookman. This is a 3.5-point spread in favor of Bethune-Cookman at 133 total. There are injuries in this game, but I think they're more severe on the Grambling State side. And this is a conference of really low level. Again, most of these teams we're going to talk about from here on out are. So we don't have injury reporting. All we know is that they didn't play in the last game. Antoine Burnett for Grambling missed their last game. PJ Eason also missed their last game. Those are contributors. Bethune-Cookman's been without Brayon Freeman, but that's not new. That's been out there for a while. And just immediately down to the prediction, we make this well outside of 3. It's the biggest mismatch we have on the entire slate. And it's one of the bigger ones we've seen in a few weeks. So anytime this happens, I'm immediately hesitating, rather than run it up to the window. My first instinct is, what mistake did I make? But I couldn't find any. Those are the injury situations that we know of. Bethune-Cookman's major advantage is on defense, where they're 209th, and Grambling is 269th. We have effective field goal percentage in favor of Bethune-Cookman, not by a ton, but that certainly is the case, and most of that comes with interior scoring. On the glass, Bethune-Cookman is a little bit better. They're almost 100 spots ahead of Grambling, despite playing a shorter lineup. Grambling is 134, Bethune-Cookman is 281. So when you add up some of these differences and you start factoring in, all right, Grambling is pretty banged up. Not sure about Burnett and PJ. If those guys miss, what are we doing here? I had those guys in, and we're making it closer to 5. So this was the first play I made on the slate, and we're waiting on a bunch of them. We're waiting on Southern. We're waiting on a couple unders in Duke and Kansas especially. This is one that we will play with a decent amount of confidence. And then a couple others I just want to rapid fire before we get out of here. Southeastern Louisiana takes on Texas-Rio Grande. It's a 1.5-point spread in favor of Southeastern Louisiana, and the total is 151. We are showing some value on Rio Grande, but this is another injury game. Southeastern Louisiana is healthy. Texas-Rio Grande, Hassan Abdul-Hakim has not played in a while, but they also did not have KT Ramey in their last game. But I think this is a game that should be very motivation focused, even if you think that it's not the most competitive where they line up in the standings and stuff. But this is a conference with progressive buys. We already talked about that. With a loss, Southeastern Louisiana is now at risk of dropping below Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, and Northwestern State. They're currently the 4. They need to keep that in order to get an extra bye. And then on the other end, this team only takes 8 teams in their conference to the tournament. So this is Rio Grande's last game. They can't make the conference tournament because of their record. This is their last game. And this is a good team. Like, we have a 1.5-point spread for a team that's not going to make the conference tournament versus a team that's a lock to make it. And you look at differences in power ratings. Southeastern Louisiana is 196. Rio Grande is at 238. It's not a major difference for teams that are so far apart in the standings. But Ramey being injured for Rio Grande is at least a hesitation for me, and one of the reasons why I haven't taken this just yet. Stylistically, these teams are pretty close. Southeastern Louisiana has a lot of advantages, just micro. They're better on defense. Technically, they're a little better on offense, but Rio Grande's actually the better shooting team. 149th in effective field goal to Southeastern Louisiana's 246. Rio Grande is much better scoring inside. They're 39th at interior scoring. Southeastern Louisiana 231 defending the interior. That's their weakness on defense. I will say Southeastern Louisiana is the better rebounding team, especially defensively. They force more turnovers, but foul margin should be about even. They're composed in a little different ways. I'm a little worried about the Ramey status, but want to highlight this game. If it comes out that he's healthy, which it may or may not, it's a small conference with bad reporting, I would play the Rio Grande side. And last up, one I'm having a little bit of problems with myself. Idaho takes on Montana State. Actually, before we get there, if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. You must be 21 or older to play in most areas. I almost forgot to say that. Back to it. Idaho takes on Montana State. This is a game with a 5.5-point spread in favor of Montana State. The total is 147. This is a game that does have some postseason implications on the line. If you just look at the way the Big Sky is composed right now, Idaho and Montana State both sit at 8 and 9 in this conference. So the winner is victim of falling below, like a Northern Arizona who's at 7 and 10 right below them. This team does have progressive buys, so you need to be in the top 6 to get a buy. Both of these teams technically are right now, but this head-to-head makes things a little tricky. As far as injuries go, Idaho is dealing with JoJo Anderson. Montana State has the more impactful one in Brandon Walker. Not that Brandon Walker, different Brandon Walker. The 6'7" forward who is the engine of the Montana State offense, who leads the team in assist rate, who leads the team, I guess, that's a weird way to frame it, has one of the lower turnover rates on this team. A lot of the offense flat out flows through Brandon Walker, who's a 6'7" center. But this team is more talented. They have a lot of players that transferred into this program, like Max Aguampalo from USC back in the day, Utah State as well. Jabe Mullins is on this team. He formerly played with Washington State and St. Mary's. This is a very talented team with a lot of good players. And stylistically, I think they've underachieved a little bit this year. Going against this Idaho team, they have a shocking advantage on defense. It's 205 to 342. That one cannot be overstated. But then we have, I think, even some offensive advantages. Idaho comes in pretty far ahead in offensive efficiency. I think most of that just comes on the glass, especially offensive rebounding. That's not something Montana State prioritizes. Instead, they prioritize getting back on defense and not getting cooked in transition. But who's the better shooting team? It's actually Montana State. 91st in effective field goal to Idaho at 100th. Both teams are good at shooting the three. And then, one team's good on defense, one team's horrible on defense. Idaho is 309th on the interior, 369th at three-point defense. Basically, they're just living on the glass. And then shooting-wise in the periphery, free throws are fairly even. Idaho's actually very good there. But turnover margin, Idaho is 237th in turnovers committed. Montana State is 38th. They're never turning the ball over. Fouls, Montana State's not in foul trouble hardly ever. Idaho is. This is one where we make around the 6.5 mark instead of the 3.5. So very much interested in playing the Montana State side. Just another one. I'm not sure where the line is going to go throughout the day. And they do have a big injury. So the Brandon Walker stuff is at least worth mentioning. But I'm seeing this actually taking money right now. The juice has shifted a little bit. I'm going to head off this stream and potentially take this, which will be available in Discord. But thank you guys for watching. We'll have more content for all of the days leading up to March Madness. And then hopefully some cool stuff for the tournament. Until next time, thank you all for watching. We'll catch you again later.